A cold wind swept across the plains of ancient Macedon, carrying with it the restless echo of hooves and the faint shimmer of steel. Dawn had barely broken, yet the horizon already glowed with tension, as if the rising sun understood it was about to illuminate a moment that would be carved into the memory of empires. For at the edge of a rugged valley, a woman stood tall atop a warhorse, her dark braid flicking behind her like a banner, her eyes burning with a fire inherited from a lineage of conquerors. Her name was Cynane, warrior princess of Macedon, half Illyrian by birth and wholly unbreakable by spirit. And on this day, she carried not only a sword, but a purpose fierce enough to challenge generals who once marched under Alexander the Great. The world she stood in was trembling. Alexander was dead, taken by fever at the height of his power, and with him died the illusion of unity. His empire, spanning continents, had no ruler strong enough to hold it together. Maps trembled in the hands of ambitious men. Generals whispered, plotted, and prepared to carve out kingdoms for themselves. But there was one obstacle they did not expect. Cynane, sister of Alexander's mother Olympias, and daughter of King Philip II, refused to let the bloodline fracture into silence. She had marched across continents before. She had survived assassins, political traps, and battlefields stacked against her. Now she marched again, determined to escort her daughter, Ada Eurydice, to the Macedonian heartland, so the girl could marry King Aridaeus and secure royal legitimacy before the generals tore the empire apart. The soldier beside her, an older veteran named Perdiccas, spoke under his breath. "My queen, they'll block the road. I'll command the army, and he does not wish your daughter on the throne." Cynane answered without turning her gaze. "I'll wish as many things, but destiny cares for none of them, and neither do I." She spurred her horse forward, her armor catching the newborn sunlight. Her presence commanded silence. For those who rode behind her, hundreds of loyal Macedonian veterans, knew her history. Cynane had been raised like no other princess. Her Illyrian mother had taught her the blade before she learned to read. Her father, Philip, revered her courage. By the age of 14, she had slain an Illyrian queen in single combat. She had fought beside her people in the brutal campaigns of Macedon, earning respect from hardened warriors who bowed to no one. She was a living contradiction, noble blood tempered by battlefield wisdom. And that combination terrified her enemies just as much as it inspired her followers. As they rode, clouds of dust grew on the horizon. Perdiccas tensed. "They're here." A hush fell over the column as the opposing forces came into view. An army larger than theirs, with banners bearing the insignia of Perdiccas, Alexander's former regent. These were elite soldiers, drilled to perfection, commanded by officers whose loyalty leaned toward power rather than legitimacy. At their head was Al, the general tasked with stopping Cynane's advance. He was known for his cold discipline, his perfect formations, his refusal to yield. But even he shifted uneasily in the saddle as Cynane approached. She lifted her chin and called out, voice ringing across the plain. "Al, son of Aripus, do you block the path of your own princess? I seek no war with Macedonians. Let my daughter pass to marry the king, so the royal line may endure." Al-Hisatatith. His men watched. His officers exchanged glances. He tried to remain composed as he answered. "I have my orders, Cynane. Your daughter's marriage threatens the balance of the empire. I cannot allow it." Cynane smiled, not kindly but fiercely. "You cannot allow? I am Cynane, daughter of Philip, sister of Alexander's mother, and veteran of campaigns your men only know from fireside tales. Do you think I fear your orders?" Whispers spread through the opposing ranks. Soldiers who had followed Alexander into Asia knew Cynane's reputation. Some had seen her fight. Her presence shook their resolve. "Al-Jautiktanat. Do not force my hand." But Cynane's determination only burned brighter. She turned to her troops, raising her sword high. "Macedonians, you followed Alexander across the world. You bled for the empire. Today, a handful of men would rewrite its destiny and silence our royal blood. Will you let them?" A thunderous shout answered her. The valley trembled under the roar of loyalty. Al realized negotiation was meaningless. His expression hardened. He signaled his formations to advance. The battle began with a crash of shields and a chorus of war cries. Cynane urged her horse forward, her sword raised high as she carved through the first wave. Her strategy unfolded with the precision of a seasoned commander. She placed her strongest infantry in a wedge formation, allowing them to pierce enemy lines like a spear. Her cavalry, though smaller, swept along the flanks to disrupt the enemy archers and javelin throwers. Cynane herself stayed near the front, not recklessly but symbolically, her presence electrifying her soldiers. Dust and earth swirled around them. The clang of iron rang through the valley. Yet despite the chaos, Cynane's movements were controlled, deliberate. She struck with purpose, using her momentum to unbalance opponents and her shield to deflect blows aimed at her horse. Al's troops countered with tight phalanx formations, their long spears creating walls of death. For a moment, Cynane's advance faltered. She sensed the pressure, the shift of momentum. Her soldiers were brave, but they were outnumbered, hemmed in by discipline and superior lines. Protus rode up beside her. "We're holding, but not for long." Cynane's mind raced. She knew the phalanx could be broken, but only by disrupting its unity. A sudden spark of insight struck her. She shouted to her riders, "Target their officers. Break their command. Break their shape." Her cavalry peeled away, slicing through the battlefield to hunt down the enemy captains whose shouted commands maintained the phalanx. Without coordinated leadership, the wall of spears wavered. A single gap formed, small but fatal. Cynane drove into it. Her horse lunged through the break, her sword flashing as she pressed deeper, her presence fracturing the disciplined ranks. Her soldiers roared and followed, slamming into the faltering phalanx with renewed strength. Momentum shifted. For the first time, Al grew afraid. He saw his lines bending, saw his soldiers hesitating under the weight of Cynane's legend. Desperation forced him forward. He charged directly for Cynane, thinking that killing the queen would shatter her troops' morale. He caught her attention with a furious cry. Their blades clashed, sparks flying. Al was strong, trained, confident. But Cynane moved with purpose born of survival, of lineage, of destiny. She did not fight to win glory. She fought to secure her daughter's future, and to protect a monarchy her family had built. Their duel raged amid the battle. Soldiers watched from both sides, breaths held, for it felt like the fate of Macedon rested on the outcome. At last, Cynane disarmed him with a swift, brutal strike, sending his sword spinning across the ground. She placed her blade at his throat. Silence fell like a curtain across the battlefield. "Yield," she commanded. Al's chest rose and fell. His pride fought the command. Yet the reality of defeat pressed heavier than the blade on his neck. Slowly he nodded. But no sooner had Cynane pulled back her sword than chaos erupted behind her. A small faction of enemy officers, unwilling to accept her victory, advanced with murderous determination. One hurled a spear. Protus shouted, "Cynane." She turned, just in time to see the spear flying toward her. She tried to dodge, but the distance was too small. The weapon struck her with brutal force. She gasped, staggered, and fell from her horse. A scream tore through her ranks. Her soldiers surged forward in fury, routing the remaining enemy forces. Al himself shouted for the attackers to stop, horrified by the treachery committed under his command. But it was too late. Protus rushed to her side, lifting her head gently. "My queen, stay with us. Please." Cynane's breaths were shallow, her strength fading. Yet her eyes remained fierce, steady, unyielding. She grasped Protus's arm. "Listen, take Eurydice to the king. Promise me she reaches Macedon. Promise." Protus felt his throat tighten. "I swear it." Cynane exhaled slowly, her final breath carrying the weight of an entire dynasty's hope. Word of her death spread like wildfire, stunning her enemies, shaking her allies, and igniting outrage across Macedon. Even Al, who had intended to stop her political ambitions, was struck with remorse. For he knew one truth. Cynane was more than a warrior. She was the last echo of a generation forged in conquest, a living link to Philip and Alexander, a woman who refused to bow to fear, politics, or fate. Her daughter, Ada Eurydice, was escorted safely to Macedon. There, driven by her mother's courage, she stepped onto the political stage with fire in her voice and resolve in her heart. She demanded recognition. She demanded legitimacy, and for a time, her presence reshaped the fragile balance of power. But Cynane's legacy did not end with Eurydice. It lived on in the whispered stories of soldiers who spoke of the queen who charged against entire armies for the sake of her bloodline. It lived in the chronicles of historians who noted her unmatched courage. It lived in the memory of Macedon as a symbol of a woman who defied the greatest generals of the age with nothing but her will, her sword, and her belief in destiny. In the years that followed, as the empire fractured and new kingdoms rose and fell, the tale of Cynane remained. A reminder that leadership was not born from crowns, but from conviction. That courage was not inherited, but chosen. That legacies were not written in the comfort of palaces, but in the dust of battlefields and the hearts of those who believed. And in that rugged valley where she took her final stand, where the wind still whistles through the stones and carries the scent of history, one can almost hear her voice, unyielding, fearless, echoing across time. I am Cynane, daughter of kings, warrior of Macedon, and I do not yield. Her story endures because it was never merely about power. It was about purpose, burning, defiant, unforgettable, a legacy that stands unbroken, like the mountains of her homeland, against the shifting storms of history.